When I first heard about Haunted Hotel, I immediately thought, here we go, another Hazbin Hotel knockoff. I mean, the premise alone screams it. Dark humor, a hotel full of supernatural beings, and even a demon trapped in a human body. But the more I dove into the show, the more I realized it's not just trying to ride Hazbin Hotel's coattails. There's actually something very deliberate going on here, something that makes it stand on its own, even if it does borrow a few visual cues or vibes. At first glance, the hotel itself feels familiar. The wallpaper, the Gothic architecture, the dimly lit hallways. You can almost hear a Hazbin fan saying, "Yeah, that looks like something Charlie might own." But beyond the aesthetics, the story takes a very different approach, one that mixes family dynamics with supernatural chaos in a way that's surprisingly relatable. The show revolves around the Freeling family, specifically Catherine, a mother trying to rebuild her life after a divorce. She inherits this enormous, eerie hotel from her deceased brother, Nathan. And if you think that just means ghosts wandering around and random scares, you're only scratching the surface. Nathan isn't gone at all. He's stuck there as a ghost, overseeing his property while dealing with all the otherworldly chaos. The cast includes Catherine's children, Ben, the somewhat typical teenage kid, and Esther, who immediately stands out as someone with more curiosity, more mischief, and a lot more ambition than her age might suggest. But the real game changer is Abaddon, a demon trapped in a human child's body, whose presence turns the hotel into a playground of chaos, dark humor, and strangely heartfelt moments. Unlike the typical ghost stories, where the spirits are either terrifying or tragic, Abaddon is complicated. He's a creature of immense demonic power, but stripped down to the limitations and needs of a human child. Think about that for a second. A being who has ruled over hell for millennia suddenly has to survive on cereal, naps, and temper tantrums. And that contrast is what makes the character so memorable. From the very first episode, the show establishes its unique rhythm. There's the gothic, slightly menacing aesthetic to satisfy your craving for spooky visuals, but that's paired with fast-paced, witty dialogue and plotlines that almost feel like a family sitcom with supernatural twists. And honestly, that's probably the smartest move the creators made. Instead of trying to directly mimic Hazbin Hotel's over-the-top musical chaos and hellish bureaucracy, Haunted Hotel opts for a more grounded approach. The stakes feel real because they're tied to the characters' emotional journeys. Catherine is adjusting to life alone, dealing with her children's problems, and navigating the strange rules of the hotel. Nathan, the ghost uncle, isn't just comic relief. He embodies the lingering past, the family legacy, and the idea that even in death, unresolved issues can hold you back. And then there's Esther and Abaddon, whose dynamic is equal parts hilarious and touching, the kind of relationship that immediately makes you invested in the story. One thing that surprised me the most was how much the show leans into metaphor. At first, it's easy to dismiss it as just another wacky supernatural series. But if you pay attention, almost every supernatural element mirrors a family or personal struggle. The hotel itself feels alive, almost like a character, representing both opportunity and fear of the unknown. Ghosts are not just spirits, they're remnants of past failures, unresolved conflicts, or people stuck in their ways. And Abaddon? He's both the embodiment of chaos and the challenge that pushes the family to confront themselves. It's this layered storytelling that elevates the series above just being a copycat. You start seeing that the show's humor, absurdity, and chaos are not random. They're intentionally designed to explore family, change, and acceptance in a world that's anything but ordinary. Even the small moments are cleverly constructed. For example, Catherine's interactions with locals are often hilarious, bordering on absurd, but they also reflect the challenge of building connections in a new place. There's an episode where a local's workplace is overrun by cats, each one somehow demanding attention and disrupting order. On paper, it sounds ridiculous, but it mirrors Catherine's struggle to balance her life while dealing with the unexpected chaos that surrounds her. And that's the brilliance of Haunted Hotel. It's absurd, yes, but it never loses sight of the character's emotional core. Even when things are at their craziest, you still understand why the family does what they does, why they care, and why the stakes matter. Now, the comparison to Hazbin Hotel is inevitable, and yes, there are moments where the show clearly nods to it. The The visual style of some supernatural entities, the slightly over-the-top personality of certain characters, even the presence of a demon trapped in a human-like form, all feel like conscious nods. But here's the key difference. Hazbin Hotel thrives on musical spectacle, chaotic humor, and satirical commentary about sin and redemption, while Haunted Hotel focuses on character, metaphor, and narrative development. The show uses its supernatural elements not just for shock or entertainment, but to explore the emotional lives of its cast. And that's what makes it stand out in a crowded field of adult animation. While one might argue that the first impression is, this is a Hazbin Hotel wannabe, by the second episode, it becomes clear that the show is carving its own path. By the time the first few episodes end, you start to realize that Esther and Abaddon are the true heart of the series. Esther is clever, mischievous, and endlessly curious, while Abaddon is chaotic, foreign, and endlessly entertaining. Together, they create the perfect storm of unpredictability and charm. The writing uses this dynamic to explore themes of friendship, growth, and the struggle to adapt to unfamiliar circumstances, all while delivering plenty of laughs and suspense. And unlike Hazbin Hotel, where redemption arcs and moral satire dominate, Haunted Hotel keeps you engaged with suspense, mystery, and the thrill of the unknown. Every episode feels like you're uncovering something deeper about the hotel, the characters, and even yourself as you relate to their experiences. The more you watch Haunted Hotel, the clearer it becomes that the show isn't just about spooky settings or funny chaos. It's about adaptation. Catherine's family, especially Esther, is constantly trying to figure out their place in this hotel that's bigger than life, literally and figuratively. Moving into a haunted hotel isn't like moving into a new neighborhood. It's moving into a space that has its own rules, its own history, and its own sense of authority. Ghosts aren't just background decoration, they each have personalities, grudges, and attachments that predate the Freeling family. And navigating all of that is no small feat. Watching Esther interact with these ghosts, trying to assert herself while still respecting, or at least surviving, their whims, is both hilarious and nerve-wracking. One wrong move could lead to a ghostly prank, a haunting, or even something far worse. Abaddon, in particular, turns every scene into a lesson in unpredictability. Here's a being who has spent 10,000 years in hell, guarding gates and torturing souls, suddenly reduced to needing a nap, wanting cereal, or throwing a tantrum because something doesn't go his way. And yet, through this childlike lens, the show explores themes of identity and adaptation like nothing else. You realize that even a demon can struggle with belonging, with understanding human norms, and with forming meaningful connections. Abaddon's presence forces the family to confront challenges they never expected. Esther sees in him a friend who's powerful, chaotic, and intriguing, but also someone who is learning what it means to care for others. The bond between the two develops in a way that's both funny and heartfelt, blending absurdity with genuine emotional weight. It's also fascinating how the show handles humor. Unlike some animated series that throw jokes at the screen without any real context, Haunted Hotel balances absurd comedy with narrative purpose. Every prank, every ghostly misadventure, every chaotic encounter feels like it's building toward understanding the family or revealing something about Abaddon. One scene might show a ghost endlessly repeating a mundane action, and it seems silly at first. But then you realize it mirrors unresolved trauma or frustration, and suddenly it becomes both funny and meaningful. This type of humor rewards attentive viewers, which is part of why the show sticks with you long after the episode ends. You laugh, but you also think about what the joke actually says about the characters or the hotel itself. And speaking of the hotel, the setting deserves its own spotlight. It's not just a haunted building, it's almost a living character. Every creaking floorboard, flickering light, and shadowy corner contributes to the suspense and mystery. The hotel isn't static, it reacts to the characters. Ghosts move through hallways at their own whims, rooms appear and disappear, and even the wallpaper seems to shift depending on the mood or danger present. This dynamic environment keeps viewers on edge while also allowing the story to explore deeper themes of memory, attachment, and change. The hotel becomes a metaphor for life itself, a place where you can't control everything, and where understanding and adapting are the only ways to survive. One of the most compelling aspects of this section of the series is how the show uses the supernatural to mirror real-life struggles. Catherine is essentially a single mother trying to manage a household that's constantly in chaos, and yet the challenges she faces with ghosts, demons, and absurd situations reflect exactly the same frustrations a parent would have in a regular life. Similarly, Esther's struggle to make friends, find her place, and assert her independence mirrors the experience of any child trying to adjust to a new environment. In fact, I found myself relating to her in ways I didn't expect. Growing up, I moved a lot, and like Esther, I often had to navigate unfamiliar surroundings, awkward social dynamics, and unexpected challenges. Watching Esther maneuver through the hotel felt strangely familiar, as if the ghosts were just the amplified version of all the social hurdles I faced as a kid. Then there's the suspense factor. The show knows how to build tension without relying solely on cheap scares. Each ghost, demon, or mysterious occurrence has rules and logic behind it, which makes the stakes feel real. Even when something absurd happens, like a poltergeist throwing furniture around or Abaddon causing chaos in a childlike fit, you understand the underlying consequence. If the Freeling family doesn't adapt, the hotel could consume them, emotionally or literally. The tension isn't just about the supernatural, it's about relationships, trust, and survival. And that's what separates this series from a simple Hazbin hotel imitation. While Hazbin thrives on flashy chaos and musical spectacle, Haunted Hotel creates suspense from character-driven stakes, making the audience care deeply about what happens next. And yet, despite all the tension and emotional weight, the show never forgets to have fun. Humor is sprinkled throughout, often in subtle ways. A ghost might misinterpret a modern human gadget, or Abaddon might demand something ridiculous like a very specific cereal. These moments could easily feel silly or out of place, but they work perfectly within the story's rhythm, providing relief while deepening the bond between characters. The humor also emphasizes the absurdity of their world. A hotel where the dead coexist with the living, a demon trapped in a child's body, and a family trying to keep it all together. It's chaotic, it's weird, and it's utterly captivating. By the midpoint of the season, it becomes clear that Esther and Abaddon aren't just side characters. They're the emotional anchor. The show carefully constructs their friendship to reflect growth, empathy, and the struggle to understand someone completely foreign to your world. At the same time, the supernatural elements remain integral, enhancing their development rather than overshadowing it. You can see the influence of Hazbin Hotel in the aesthetic and humor, sure, but the storytelling is markedly different. The series isn't relying on shock value or edgy humor alone. It's building a narrative that rewards investment and patience, drawing the audience into the lives of these characters in ways that are both thrilling and emotionally resonant. By this point, I had to stop and admit something. Haunted Hotel isn't a copy. It's inspired by Hazbin Hotel, sure, but it's telling its own story. It uses familiar tropes but twists them, focusing on human and demon relationships rather than pure spectacle. The humor, suspense, and emotional stakes work together to create a world that feels alive and unpredictable, keeping you guessing while still grounded in relatable struggles. And as the first season progresses, the audience starts realizing that the real thrill isn't just what's happening in the hotel, it's how these characters are changing, growing, and surviving in a world that's as absurd as it is dangerous. By now, it becomes impossible to ignore how much Haunted Hotel leans on its characters to drive the story forward. The supernatural elements aren't just there for shock or spectacle. They exist to challenge, reveal, and sometimes torment the Freeling family. Take Nathan, for example, Catherine's deceased brother. On paper, he's a typical ghost character, sarcastic, a little annoying, and tied to the hotel he once owned. But the deeper you go, the more you see how Nathan represents the weight of the past and unresolved family issues. He's tethered to the hotel not because he wants to haunt, but because he can't let go. And watching him struggle to balance lingering regrets with his newfound role as part of the family is surprisingly moving. He's a ghost, sure, but his experience mirrors the way real people wrestle with legacy, responsibility, and belonging. Meanwhile, Catherine's arc grows more compelling with every episode. She's not just a mother or a hotel manager, she's a woman trying to reestablish control over a life that's spiraling in ways she couldn't predict. There's a recurring theme in the show about the unpredictability of new beginnings, and Catherine embodies that perfectly. She's constantly balancing what's best for her kids, managing the chaotic hotel, and facing moral dilemmas that range from the absurd to the downright horrifying. For instance, dealing with Abaddon isn't just a logistical challenge, it's a moral one. Here's a being with immense potential for destruction, yet his childlike demeanor and evolving relationship with Esther force Catherine to navigate territory she never expected. How do you raise or guide something that's part child, part demon, and entirely unpredictable? That's not a question you see in most adult animation, and it gives the show an emotional weight that goes beyond simple humor or spectacle. Esther and Abaddon, of course, remain the emotional core. Their relationship is layered and constantly evolving. Esther, while curious and clever, also carries the anxiety of adjusting to an unfamiliar place, trying to understand rules she didn't grow up with. She sees in Abaddon a reflection of her own displacement, an outsider trying to navigate a world that feels both magical and threatening. And Abaddon's struggle to understand human behavior, emotions, and morality provides some of the series' most suspenseful and hilarious moments. Watching him attempt even the simplest social interactions or misinterpret human norms creates tension, humor, and insight all at once. Every scene with the two of them feels alive, as if anything could happen, and often it does. The show also excels at using its absurdity to heighten suspense. There are moments where the supernatural seems almost arbitrary, ghosts appearing in the hallway, objects moving without explanation, Abaddon's powers flaring in unexpected ways. But there's always a method to the madness. The writers cleverly tie these events to the characters' growth or emotional arcs, making even the most bizarre situations meaningful. For example, there's an episode where Abaddon attempts to practice his demonic powers, resulting in chaos that nearly destroys part of the hotel. On the surface, it's comedic, but it also underscores the theme of control. How do you contain immense power when you don't fully understand it? How do you integrate someone, or something, into a family when their abilities, temperament, and perspective are so wildly different? These are real stakes hidden behind cartoonish antics, which is part of what makes the show so gripping. Humor in Haunted Hotel is particularly clever because it often comes from contrast. Abaddon's centuries-old wisdom clashing with the needs of a child's body, Catherine's attempts at normalcy colliding with the absurdity of supernatural guests, or Nathan's ghostly perspective highlighting human absurdities. All of these create tension that's both funny and thrilling. Unlike Hazbin Hotel, where the chaos is more external and performative, Haunted Hotel uses absurdity internally. The stakes feel immediate, and the humor serves the narrative rather than just being spectacle. This approach makes the audience care not only about what's happening, but also about the consequences for the characters, which is rare in animated shows of this kind. And speaking of consequences, the show isn't afraid to explore darker themes either. The idea that Abaddon was once a demon of immense power, tasked with guarding a gate in hell, raises questions about morality, responsibility, and identity. Here's a being who has existed for millennia, whose perspective spans centuries, now confined to a mortal-like existence with limited power and bound by human rules. Watching him wrestle with these limitations, while simultaneously forming attachments to Esther and the Freeling family, adds layers of tension. Every choice he makes carries weight. Use his powers to assert control, or learn to respect the human experience he's temporarily part of. Every episode subtly reminds you that despite the humor and chaos, the stakes are existential. The show also does a brilliant job of exploring relational tension. For instance, Catherine's attempts to guide Esther to protect her from supernatural influences or moral pitfalls often clash with Esther's desire for freedom, curiosity, and independence. This dynamic creates constant suspense. Will Esther make a choice that endangers herself or the hotel? Will Catherine overstep and cause emotional strain? And Abaddon, with his unpredictable nature, sits right in the middle of these conflicts, amplifying uncertainty. This triangle of relationships, mother, daughter, demon, keeps the audience emotionally engaged while constantly questioning what might happen next.